The second tool that we use is what Infido supports us on, which is Amber, which is a fantastic tool because what it does is it helps us listen to employees on a very, very personalized basis throughout their employment journey with the organization.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the People Led Show. I'm your host, Tehsin Kazi, and our guest for today is the incredible Sonali Chatterjee. She is the Deputy President and Head of People, Performance and Culture at Aon. She comes with more than 2 decades of experience in the industry and has previously held positions at global organizations like Aon India Insurance Brokers, Max New York Life Insurance, and Tata Chemicals. She brings a wealth of experience spanning the length of HR and has been named the top 10 women HR leaders by Women Entrepreneur India magazine. Welcome, Sonali. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Nancy, for having me over today. Very happy to be here.
Sonali, so first off, this is a question that we ask all our HR leaders, and we want to know who's the human behind human resources. So, who's Sonali outside of work?
So, Sonali outside of work is a mother, is a friend, is a wife. I enjoy spending time with my kids, with my family, with my pets. I am very fond of animals and I like traveling. So, getting the opportunity to go to different places is something I look forward to doing whenever I manage to get the time out. Reading a lot of books. And so, these are some of the things that I enjoy, and definitely meeting up with people who are close to me. So, taking time out to stay connected with my friend circle, with my family circle is very important to me as well.
Wow, Sonali. I think what I like about your answer the best is that, in the true sense of the term, outside of work, you're completely just unwinding. You're not looking at being productive or doing something, achieving something. You just want to be you and unwind and get that much needed break and relaxation. So that's great. I think as a people leader, that's something, great for other people to take away from you. So, Sonali, moving on and switching gears a little bit here and going into the topic that we are here to discuss today, the state of EX in HR, right? Just wanted to understand from you, what are the top 2 or 3 employee experience dilemmas or questions that you as a people leader want answers to?
Sure, Tehsin. So firstly, I think, EX, or as we are calling employee experience, I think it is really becoming the core of what we want to focus upon when we look at driving employee experience, employee engagement in any organization today, right? And I think as we evolve in this journey and as we kind of constantly try to improve the overall EX at our organization, I think the dilemma or the challenge that I look at today, and I'm sure it is not just my challenge, it would be the challenge for many HR leaders, is that fundamentally, if we really look at the various employee segments that we have in the organization, whether it be in terms of people who have a certain tenure in the organization, whether it be in terms of people who have come from certain age groups, people who have come from certain other employee or diverse segments, each such segment within itself has its own unique experiential requirements. So, while we walk on this journey of employee experience, how, as an organization, can we really prioritize all segments and ensure that each and every segment gets its desired environment and desired organization to work in? Is really the dilemma today, because every time we prioritize basis feedback, basis what we believe is critical and more here and now, we're also deprioritizing others. So, which is where my dilemma comes from, that how do we make sure that we actually have an impact on each and every employee segment in the organization?
And that's a very interesting response, Sonali. And I've interviewed a lot of HR leaders, and I think this does not come up so soon in the conversation. For me, I think this is the first.
Okay.
Right. And so, my next question also doesn't come up really soon in the conversation. The takeaway from your response for me is that it's about personalization. It's about, creating personal experience, customized experience for each of these segments. My question then to you is that if you need to personalize their experiences, you need to be listening to each of these segments individually. So What are some channels that you use to listen to employees, and how do you suggest other HR leaders should look at listening to employee sentiment on the ground?
I think we have a multi-pronged approach to employee listening. They're saying that we have seen success through each of these platforms. So the first aspect that we focus on is on ensuring that we have an annual employee listening exercise. This annual employee listening exercise helps us gather uniform feedback at a point in time from colleagues across the board on multiple aspects from an employee engagement perspective. Through this exercise, we also make sure that we are collecting employee inputs on any key strategic initiatives, any specific, universal changes or strategies or aspects which have touched all employees, which have happened in the last 1 year, right? So, which gives us an input in terms of how we want to shape our strategy going forward on some of those areas. So that's one aspect. The second tool that we use is what Infido supports us on, which is Amber, which is a fantastic tool because what it does is it helps us listen to employees on a very, very personalized basis throughout their employment journey with the organization linked to the various work stages that they go through, whether it be in terms of their onboarding experience, whether it be in terms of their first 3 months experience, first 6 months experience when they are getting promoted, experience when they are getting confirmed, etc., etc. So it is linked to the various life stages or work stages that they experience at the organization. And this is again targeted to those colleagues who are going through those experiences. So we do have enough and more insights and analysis to really understand what's happening with each and every colleague as they go through their journey with the organization. This tool also really helps us identify people who might be at risk, people who might be in the organization for a certain period of time, and we feel through their responses to the questions which are asked by the AI chatbot, we get a sense that maybe there is something which is bothering them, which is not really working out well for them, and we're able to identify early any signs of distress that a colleague is going through and address those proactively, which again helps us hugely as an organization when we look at our people retention, engagement, all of that, right? The third tool that we use, I've seen, is also in person employee listening through focus groups. So, what we typically do is we take the insights from our chatbot Amber through, kind of understanding what are the pockets where maybe some amount of deeper listening, a little bit of deep diving is necessary. Those are the places where we probably plan a physical intervention, an in person intervention, where we go meet those colleagues in those locations or in those offices of our organization, spend time with them, engage in asking specific questions in terms of their employment experience, specifically ensure that we, pick up on some of those elements which we may have had as an hypothesis basis the feedback from the tool. And we again do some fact finding and work through some action plans to address those concerns and issues. So these are the three ways in which we make sure that we are constantly listening to our employee, trying to customize our approach as much as possible and ensure that we have our ear on the ground and we are not surprised by anything which is coming our way.
Wow. All those three are at very different levels where each level takes you deeper and deeper. And I think that's the beauty of that process that you are following. So, Sonali, there are three channels that you're using across the board, across the organization. What is the employee expectations from EX today? Like, do you see any drastic change from what you maybe saw 2 or 3 years ago?
So, like I mentioned, I think the future is greater and greater personalization. I think each employee believes they are, critical to the organization, and hence their expectation is that the organization will not look at them as a part of a whole, but look at them as individuals and understand what their individual requirements are. So it is unfair probably to, paint the entire Gen X with one brush and the entire Gen Y with one brush, because what is the kind of backgrounds that they are coming from, the academic experiences that they have had, as well as the financial background that they are coming from, also plays a big role in how they approach their work. For example, I've heard so much about, the so-called Gen Y having a huge focus on, preferring to, look at a very strong work-life balance and ensuring that they have both the ability to work productively, as well as focus on their out of work activities and pursuits very, very strongly as well. But within this entire Gen Y, I have also seen personally that there are those who probably still come from a little bit of a Gen X mindset where they are more than happy to kind of actually first focus on building their careers and making sure that they are putting in as many extra hours as required to build their career aggressively in the initial years before they start focusing on balancing it out. Hence, I think the future of employee experience is customization, is personalization. If an organization is able to actually customize a personalized journey for each and every person in the organization, I firmly believe that that organization is truly going to be the one which creates that wow around EX.
Sonali, there's one thing that you said there which really stuck with me, which is that, employees do not want to be seen as a part of a whole, but they want to be seen as individuals. And I think that right there sums up everything you have said so far. So switching gears a little bit, Sonali, is taking action for each of these segments also a challenge? How do you manage that part of it?
Absolutely. So I think that is obviously, you've kind of hit the nail on the head. That is probably the biggest challenge because once you have had these insights, once you have had all of these inputs which have kind of come your way from the various employee segments and not just segments, from the various employees, I would say, especially when we look at this three-pronged approach that we follow, right? But what you need to really do is act upon that because once you have listened to people, not acting upon their inputs is actually hugely detrimental to any future listening exercise that you plan to do, right? You want to make sure that your listening builds more trust and does not break down the trust that you're creating. And I think that's where organizations sometimes struggle as well because there is always going to be prioritization which will need to be done given that there are limitations on resources. But over a period of time, I think once you have been on this journey for a while, at least our experience tells us that over a period of time, the investment required starts going down because you have been in the process, for a while, which means that you have been constantly, kind of making sure that you have an ongoing communication, ongoing closure on various open items which emerge through these conversations. And over a period of time, you yourself start to realize as an organization that you are solving lesser and lesser because you've already solved for much. So I think it's an ongoing journey, but as you keep picking up, aspects to focus upon on an ongoing basis, the impact is real, and the impact is something that will truly lead to value for the organization and for the people.
Got it. Sonali, any tips on how HR leaders can go about prioritizing these aspects?
So honestly, I think there is no formula for this. I think depending upon what are some of the concerns which are emerging, one typically would need to bucket them into categories. So, for example, when we look at some of the concerns which are emerging, there could be concerns which are specific to business processes and aspects which are detrimental from a business process standpoint. There could be concerns which are more related to, say, managers and how people are experiencing challenges with managers. There could be concerns with that, which are more people practices and policies related. So the moment you start bucketizing these, you realize that tackling some of these may be an HR concern. Tackling some of the others may not even be an HR concern, but you need to flag it off to the right people who can solve for those, right? So the employee listening practice is honestly a window to understanding what are some of the pain points for employees today. But does it mean that each and every pain point is necessarily related to HR? It is not. So what one has to do is one has to make sure that once you have done the listening, you are able to categorize the challenges across the various aspects that it is focusing upon, and then accordingly assign responsibility and take action on the same. But the onus of going back to the employee with the solution will still lie with the HR team.
You started off with saying that maybe there's not one answer to all the problems, but I think you've given us a very good framework of customize, assign, action, and ownership. I think if HR leaders can look at it from this perspective, they should be able to start actioning and actually driving results sooner than later. You said something about manager, and that's where I want to take my next question to. From a manager perspective, what are some things that you do and recommend others do to make managers effective?
So, one is, of course, making sure that we look at managers as a separate segment by themselves when we are focusing on the employee listening activities, whether it be in terms of the Amber data that we look at, whether it be in terms of the overall colleague survey insights that we look at. We always look at a manager cut to understand how are the managers really doing, both in terms of their own abilities as a manager, as well as their engagement levels and that of the team which is working with them. So, all of this insight definitely helps us identify if there are any challenges which are emerging in any teams. A comparative analysis in terms of a year on year or a period to period analysis also helps to understand if there are any sharp dips or rises which are happening in the overall employee experience levels. Which are associated with a particular manager, which again become trigger points for us to focus upon that particular manager and their team. In terms of providing support to a manager, there are multiple interventions which we, make sure that managers go through to equip them with the right kind of skills, knowledge, and approach when it comes to managing people and ensuring that they are taking the right decisions. So I think it's a mix of both of these. One is making sure that we are tracking and monitoring. The other is that we are enabling. I think between both of these approaches, we ensure that our managers are having a good time themselves and ensuring that they are giving the right kind of an environment to the team.
All right. My next question is on data and metrics. So, what are some key indicators or KPIs that you track in terms of employee experience? Is this the same across organizations? Any recommendations there?
So I think there are multiple KPIs that we track. I've seen, of course, the ones that we get directly from Amber are, the experience score, which kind of continues to give us an insight in terms of what's the overall experience level that an individual is having in the organization. And we have our own internal targets around the same, saying that, it should at least be around this much. We also track what's the overall employee engagement level for people across the organization, and this comes through the annual colleague survey that we do. So we want to make sure that we are constantly on an improvement journey on that, and we also look at benchmarks in terms of how we are faring against both ourselves as well as competitors in that overall group. We also track other metrics, so whether it be in terms of our attrition levels, whether it be in terms of our high potential attrition levels. We track retention numbers as well to make sure that, what is the kind of retention that we are seeing across the organization. We also track diversity retention specifically, to make sure that we are not losing our diverse talent. We also track regrettable attrition separately to make sure that, we are keeping our tabs on that as well. We track, manager engagement scores by each manager, so that we are again doing, like I mentioned, comparative analysis and ensuring that we are able to quickly identify any gap areas if necessary. Each of those elements have their own correlation to business, and business hence is also equally invested in managing these matrices and ensuring that they take the necessary accountability towards managing the same as well. So it's not just an HR KRA.
Sonali, I'm almost towards the end. I have my last two questions. The first one is, do you think women are well represented today in leadership positions, or is there still more we can do? And if yes, what should that be?
I think definitely Delphine, it's a better position today than what we used to be probably 10, 15 years back. So I think from the time that I started off in my career to where we are today, I think there has been a lot of work. I think the biggest plus is the visibility and the acceptance that this has had as an issue that one needs to focus upon and one needs to work upon across multiple organizations. So I know that there are organizations like ours which are actually focusing on diversity targets across all levels, and I think that's a fantastic state of affairs to be. But at the same time, given that it still needs to be put as a target, it clearly means that there is work to be done, right? So it is not yet at the levels that it should be. It is not yet at par. right? So to that extent, yes, I think a lot of effort still needs to be put. And I think the way I read it, at least in terms of the statistics, in terms of the numbers, I think organizations definitely need to focus on the middle layers where actually the maximum dropouts in terms of women happens. And I think um, the organizational culture has a role to play in that. So if there are organizations which have been able to successfully navigate this period, it has been because they have built a very empathetic approach towards this situation. And if we want to continue to focus on ensuring that we provide the right kind of a work environment to allow women to continue to, focus on their careers, then we need to build enough flexibility. We need to build enough empathy. We need to build enough orientation around their requirements at the various life stages that we go through to equip them to continue to focus on their career. They should not be forced to make a choice.
Absolutely. And I think on the topic of empathy, Sonali, one of the areas which I feel also women can definitely be supported is even if they are out of the system because they've made a certain life choice, helping them get back into the system is also something organizations can definitely help them with.
True, very true, Tessin. In fact, at Aeon, we have this process of actually identifying people who have taken a career break and helping them come back to the workforce. So that is an initiative that we are kind of focusing on, and we want to kind of keep investing in that to make it a much more impactful initiative going forward.
That is amazing. Which brings me to my last question, Sonali. You've been in the industry for more than 2 decades. That's a long time to, be doing the length and breadth of HR. What is the one advice you would like to give first-time people leaders across India?
Okay. So I think the first-time people leaders, what I would like to just give them as an example or as an advice, and which honestly comes from my experience as well, is spend time getting to know your team, understand what are the triggers with each and every person who works with you, because as we have learned through our entire employee experience journey, no one person is the same as the other. So make sure that you understand each and every person individually. Take that time to invest in each and every person, because as you build those relationships, making sure that your team is a highly performing, highly productive team will become much easier for you as a manager, as a leader, because what each and every employee genuinely wants from their managers is fundamentally somebody who cares for them, who takes the trouble to know them and to understand, what gets them going. So as long as you're able to address those aspects as a manager, trust me, you will, pretty much have a fantastic team working for you day in and day out.
Amazing. Sonali, thank you very much. We've covered a lot of ground today, right from listening to challenges to metrics to, women leaders. I think we've covered everything that we had to. Thank you very much. It was a great time talking to you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.